Okay,
Got it.
welcome.
Yeah.
Today we have a very special guest. It's Kristina Morrison, right?
Yes.
Is your last name Kristina Morrison is
Yes.
a teacher of special ed and inclusive classrooms and has done work with a variety of neurodivergent populations and children. So thank you for joining us today. What
Of
I'm doing
course.
with this series of podcasts, I call them podcasts, but I do them on Zoom because that way students who need to look at lip reading or who find that helpful can watch it if they want to, but they can just listen to it on their walk or their commute or whatever they're doing. I find that students today process information in a more sort of multisensory way. Um, and the students, by the way, will be delighted to see your animals molest you during Zoom.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, mine often do that too. They get very curious what I'm talking to, and they try to figure it out. So a lot of times in meetings, my cat's tail will come by the camera as
Yeah.
well.
This is Billy Idol, our orange foster failure cat who really only wants you when you don't want him.
Yeah, well, that's how cats are,
Yeah.
right? I'm not sure who's actually trained. And
Oh,
actually,
Billy.
the funny thing is that identification with animals in nature is a big part of this course. This is a new course called Neurodivergence in Literature and Media. And I decided instead of lecturing, because the course is online and asynchronous, I decided to do a series of podcasty conversations where we sort of get different perspectives on neurodivergence. Um, so
Billy.
a couple of the novels they're reading have very intense identifications with animals in nature. They're actually going to look at Anna Green Gables,
Okay.
yeah, as a kind of neurodivergent consciousness being presented. And she's fiercely identified with nature and very imaginative. And I don't know if you've ever read the novel, but she goes on and on for pages. There aren't even paragraph breaks. And you get this wonderful sense of how her cognition works so differently than the Victorian world around her.
Yes.
They're also doing Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is the perspective of an autistic teenager fiercely identified with a dog and also his rat that he carries around with him. Um, yeah, so these kind of kinetic learning experiences are very much a part of the novels that we're looking at.
Good.
Um, yeah, so Christina and Billy Idol, I'm so happy to have you both. I wonder if we could start with what you've noticed. I assume you've been an educator for a while, and this idea of neurodivergence, where we are now, growing to this umbrella concept, which is big and hard to say and get your mind around. Can you comment on this shift and sort of how we have grown in thinking about neurodiversity from what you saw maybe a while ago in the classroom?
Well, this is I'm going into my 21st year of teaching, and I've only ever taught in the early childhood setting. The oldest that I wanted to is second grade, and that was a fun year. But I think that we've become a lot more responsive to neurodiversity and at least taking the steps to identify it and embrace it and learn more about how to support all of ourselves with whatever neurodiverse issue we're having in whatever given moment. But in particular, our students who are struggling with communication and our families that are just learning to navigate, it's very important to kind of be as educated and open and, just kind of warm to the idea that we're all here as a team, more of a team approach and trying to, I don't want to call things problem solve, if issues and maybe help each other with struggles that go on just from parenting and an educational perspective. And it's very parenting and teaching sometimes can be very lonely where you are not sure what to do and you're not sure what to Google. You're not sure who to ask for help and who is someone that you can trust and who, you know, how to help. So those shifts, I think, in really being very mindful about a whole learning, a whole child the whole family approach, I think, has made a big difference. It's made a big difference and impact in my career. It's been very helpful to build a community that way.
So part of the movement toward neurodivergence, you're saying, is also part of growing a support network between parents and you. You see it as a kind of
Yes.
team building effort. So it's not just understanding cognition, but to you, it's building a community around that understanding.
Yes. Because I think we as humans, like we're very, some of us are very self-reflective and, hard on ourselves. And you need someone to say, you know what, this is tough. This seems very difficult right now, but these are the things that others have found helpful, or these are some strategies that might help. These are some things we can do and put in place, and let's try this and not be afraid. I think as a younger teacher, I found that I was so bound to what I had learned in pedagogy, what I had learned from the professionals that seemed like they had it all together at the time, and not giving myself permission to say, you know what, whatever this is that I'm trialing is not working. I don't feel successful. I'm frustrated. My students are frustrated. Let's stop right where we are, right dead in the middle of whatever it is, and switch gears. I think that there are just instances where we as a community of learners, because I view myself as a learner every day, all day, I try. I think we need to give ourselves the grace to understand that, you know what, if at first you don't succeed, you might have to shift gears, dust yourself off, and try a different avenue.
Can you like, I think that's like a wonderful moment where you're saying your training and then your real world experience in the classroom kind of had a conflict. Can you give a really vivid example of a time when that happened, when you had to scrap the lesson plan, when it wasn't working? And I don't know if we can analyze why it wasn't working and think about the clash between your training and what you actually were presented to do.
Sure. My very, I wouldn't say fondest, but a very prominent memory was I was student teaching, and I had student taught in the fall. And this was a fall, it was like a Halloween, following directions craftivity. We were creating a jack-o'-lantern, and we were talking about, we were doing a week of pumpkins, and we had diversed into, oh, when we put a face and decoration on pumpkins, we call them jack-o'-lantern, building language around the holiday. And it was a paper craft that had far too many pieces, that I spent hours cutting all these pieces out so that I just could give. Now we're going to use the triangle one step at a time. And I really thought that I was going to do well. Well, there were just too many pieces, and I had probably about half an hour and 25 kindergartners, and it was not going well. It was very kerfluffled, and it was still early in the school year, and I didn't realize yet, like, we don't know well how to use glue sticks. We don't know how to use school tools, scissors. We don't know the names of things yet. We're still working on that. And I was just so gung ho that I thought it was going to work, and I cried, and I was hanging it up in the hallway afterwards. And, they were at every level of complete. And I was just so I was embarrassed, and I felt like a failure. And it was just in that moment, it was a terrible moment. And I was like, you know what, Christina, perhaps maybe accounting would have been a better major instead of teaching. And I was the parent of, I had a toddler, not yet a toddler. She was an infant, and my son was in kindergarten. So I was really sure I was going to nail this, and I did not. I did not. So in the future, I learned to really, like, it's okay to make modifications. That's an important part of helping me do a good job and helping me get the most concise and important experience to my students that I can possibly get. But it was hard, and it's still with me. It was so embarrassing. It was very embarrassing.
So, and part of that then is you're in a position where the things that the outcomes of your classroom are also your own performance to the school. So
Yes.
there's also that level of that's it's not just the team, but there's also like a performance of
Yes. And
the
it does shift as your career goes on. At that point, I was just so concerned with A, getting a job. I was concerned with pleasing my cooperating teacher. I was, worried about the principal knowing my name so that if there were an opening at the close of student teaching, that I would have, made enough of an impression where I would get thought of. And I was fortunate, even tears and all, that that did happen. And I spent the remainder of that year as a long-term substitute, and then the following year worked as a paraprofessional. In at the time, the grades were K to 2. It was a K to 2 classroom, so that was a good experience. Before the next year, I got hired as a second grade inclusion teacher. But those are 21 years, 22 years later, and it's still very much on my heart and something that I think of.
So you disintegrate because the task wasn't the right task for your population. How,
Right.
like, and then I guess what I'm wondering is after the disintegration, how did you come back and not change to accounting? And at what point did you recognize that it wasn't your teaching, but it was the task itself or the approach? Or like, can you just explain that growth?
It probably, once I was able to regulate myself and, get out of all of my feelings out of the way, I think I realized, okay, Christina, like this is, and my cooperating teacher was very helpful and supportive in saying that, what, this is how you're learning, we're learning too. This is my first time being Christina. This is my first time being a teacher, my first time doing many, many things. And I think, again, being able to give yourself some distance and reflect and think, okay, it's not that no one was hurt. Everyone went home happy. Everyone got to their mommies and daddies. It really, even though it felt so big, it wasn't that big in the grand scheme of things. And then just, let's try something. Let's modify your approach and, really be very thoughtful about what is important in each lesson and what is the goal? What is my students will be able to? What do I want them to know? And even like in special ed, lots of the lessons are life skills lessons, social skills lessons. We're so little and so young, and they're so, like, we're blessed that lots of our kids do get a lot of exposure to different situations, but this is their first time maybe leaving their mommy, maybe with anyone that isn't a family member.
Right. You're sort of early childhood is the transition years where they're sort of learning school. Is it beneficial to have a neurodiverse population together, or would you say there's benefits to sort of putting people on the spectrum together, ADHD students together? Is there anything that's particularly beneficial about putting sort of cognitive differences together?
I think that it's beneficial in that, back to that learning community, in the world there, we are a very diverse world. Anywhere we go there, it's like the current thing that I read that's like, don't be too hard on anyone because you never know what invisibility, that whatever they're carrying. And it's kind of the same in the classroom. The kids need to have exposure, and we need to model and practice expectations for dealing with and navigating all different types of people. It's critical. I think we set our kids up for failure by over separating them. There are, and especially in my venue, there are many instances where a child maybe can't be included for the whole day, but maybe they're included for special areas. They're included at lunch so they have, like, access to more neurotypical friends, but the learning construct is a little bit different for them.
Mhm.
I think that the neurotypical kids, it's just as important for them to be exposed and learn, because you might not get that at home, and you don't know. I can't imagine all of the different backgrounds and socioeconomics and conditions that our learners are coming from. So I like to try and use as many of these things that come up as a teachable moment, because I don't know if I'll be able to capitalize it. And I want to make sure that someone has done that for them.
I see. So if like the jack-o'-lantern is sort of your nightmare before Christmas
It
moment,
was.
is there a different moment where you did modify on the spot and it was a beautiful moment and it worked?
Um, There are, I feel like now, this sounds, I hate to sound complacent and I don't mean it that way, but I think at this point in my career, so many things are just so automatic that I'm modifying them. Like sometimes I have to take a step back. I'm like, oh, I'm just the way it is, I'm modifying it. And sometimes, especially early in the year, we're modifying mostly school tools and like the daily components that we need to accomplish in order to get from point A to point B within the classroom. So our routine building and practicing with the classroom materials, I think those have been successful moments, knowing that it is very important, like teaching someone how to have snack with a group of people that is not your family, like at table etiquette and all different things like that. I think giving myself time and the beginning of the year, like I probably don't really do anything very academic until the end of September so that my students have enough time to acclimate and learn, have the time to practice all of the things that we're throwing at them that are not things you do at home. You're not necessarily hanging your backpack in a cubby and unpacking your things at home or having a snack from a lunchbox and opening your own packages. So I think that has been very helpful. Just knowing, don't try to do all of the big ticket items in one lesson. That was a very critical thing to take with myself and keep in my practice.
Okay, so it sounds like it's constant modification, like that's the
It
name of
is
it, and that it's constant modification of a curriculum, that the curriculum is kind of over there, but that there's all these pieces that's where you modify.
right. And it is, especially in my venue, the as far as the curriculum goes, the powers that be always presented as these are there for you as tools and resources, not necessarily. I may never be at the same pace. Like I will not start. I think they probably start foundations, which is our phonics program, maybe the third week of September. I probably won't start it. I'll probably still be doing pre-readiness skills because my kids, they're not ready for that. They don't know they don't know what a letter is yet. They haven't really had enough experience with that. And our pre-K curriculum is very play-based and social, and it lends itself more toward like a child-directed academic setting. So if the child is interested in it, then these things would be presented. So they might not have even really had much exposure. So I like to give it everyone time to get comfortable and settled in before we really have to attack anything that, I have to get done with them.
So it sounds like to you the socialization is the precondition to actually the academic piece.
For
Like
these
that,
little guys, yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
really
think
great.
if they, like, we go back to Maslow, if their safety needs and if their foundational needs don't feel met, then it's very difficult to get anything accomplished or to teach them, help them, co-regulate with them, give them those skills. It's very difficult if they don't trust me. I have to, I'm already in love with them. I haven't seen their faces, but my goal in those first weeks are I need them to fall in love with me like I'm their crazy auntie so that they'll listen to me when I need them to listen and know the difference between my tone when I'm being playful, when I'm doing something academic, when I'm giving a direct instruction that I need them to follow for any safety reason. It's important that we have that rapport built and they understand how to read me and I know how to maintain them.
I really like this role of the crazy auntie. One of my questions for you was going to be how you saw yourself in relation to these children, coach, mentor, whatever. But I love the crazy auntie, partly because that was a common role. The uncle and the auntie is a very common role in children's literature and in media. This,
Right.
like the Drosselmeyer figure who brings the nutcracker. They're like sort of outside the family, but part of a kinship structure.
Yes.
Yeah. So I really like that the crazy auntie, which is maybe not how you think of teachers 50 years ago.
Oh, they were, I was afraid. I was very afraid.
Yeah, a teacher. Yeah, I was very afraid, and I can remember moments in the classroom being little, of serious shame. Have you, how much time do you spend sort of an academic instruction versus social issues in the classroom? And like, are there microaggressions that you need to manage or sort of socialization issues that are constantly needing to be managed?
Well, sometimes I think the gift of time that we spend building the community really does help with that. So there aren't I don't notice very many student led microaggressions, but as a person working in a classroom that is usually very heavily staffed, there have been instances. This is something they also don't tell you when you attend Rowan University in, the 1990s. They don't tell you that as a teacher, they promote, you should really get your special ed certification. It'll make you so marketable, but that also means that you will end up managing other adults. And that's not, that is, I prefer to lead by example, and I take more of a mentor, coach, crazy aunt position with everyone. And I think that's been helpful, but there are many times where personality clashes occur among the staff members, and there are, as the year goes on, there will be microaggressions from the staff members that you will have to, 1 minute manage and figure out a way to circumvent them and, delete them from our daily function. That has been something that is a continual growth process for me because I am very much a peacekeeper, a lover, not a fighter unless I really have to fight for someone else. So it's very uncomfortable when I have to come into a management role within my own space with people that
Yeah.
they're not, it's not any reflection of them, it's just situational. Like the classroom is very stressful. The things that happen in a self-contained classroom are very stressful. There are not people that come and help you. So you have to have a repertoire of things so that you can save yourself, the children, and the other adults that are in the room. Becomes very oniony as the years go on.
I never thought about the fact that special ed classrooms are heavily staffed with assistants who are probably inexperienced, probably young. Um, and in fact, as I've been talking to people who work with neurodivergent populations, 9 times out of 10, I'm finding that they identify as, to some degree, neurodivergent, which is also interesting. So I'm sure some of the paraprofessionals also identify as neurodivergent, and that's probably why they want to work with special ed populations. So, and I never thought about that before, that you have to manage other adults. Is there a story you can tell, a vivid story where there was sort of a tense moment or a microaggressive moment in managing a situation?
It's Usually it's about the share of work or the motivational status or of one party. It's either, like I guess, incongruity between one person feeling as though, even from my observation, maybe they don't want to step on toes or they're not exactly sure what the responsibilities of their position are. And then someone else who maybe has more experience and a little larger role. So let's say a shared paraprofessional and a classroom paraprofessional. The shared paraprofessional usually is just mostly just responsible for a particular student or students. And your classroom paraprofessional is kind of like your wingman, wing woman, wing person for whatever it is that you're doing. So there are times where the one person in the classroom staff does do more, and that kind of does build a little bit of contention. So it's tricky to try and make sure that things are as equal or even and fair as you possibly can, and kind of being mindful of that and watching what's going on with the rapport between the other staff members, because that it does change. It affects the energy in the classroom, and the kids feel it. The kids can feel it if I'm upset or if I'm uptight or the other people are, there's a little bit of tension, the kids know, and it throws everything off.
Interesting. So they actually kinetically pick up the vibe of what's going on
They
between
do.
the
They
adults.
do. And I find really especially in this population where I'm lucky enough to be, these kids, because that maybe their expressive communication isn't what you would expect at whatever the age is, they are very observant. They are very visual. Their backup spidey sense is visual learning, and they will watch. And you don't think that you just think they're kids in a room, and they're not. They are watching everything that you do. So, and your responses, your facial responses, because this is the way that they're processing the world. And how do we learn how to navigate the world ourselves if we haven't seen someone else do it? It's very difficult to be the cheerleader for everyone and the peacekeeper and the
Mhm.
auntie and the mum and the mommy and the whatever else I get called all day long,
Yeah.
in those situations, and really making sure that you have a strong self-care plan beyond that, because sometimes we deal with very heightened kids with big feelings, kids with big responses, and there's nothing you can do as a human, unless you're a robot, in my experience, to not let your amygdala go nuts and your feelings go nuts. And now you're regulating, self-regulating, and you're co-regulating at the same time. And you still have, you know, 10 to 25 other kids and staff around you that you have to model like you have it all together. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a great deal of practice and a fair amount of reading and research to be able to really hold it all together.
So what drew you to this? I don't know if you identify as neurodivergent in any way or if this population drew you for some reason.
I had a what I would describe as a difficult childhood. My parents divorced when I was very young, and in 1983, it felt to me as a second grader that I was the first person in the whole entire world. Like I had a scarlet letter D on, like I was the child. I'm the product of divorce. And switching schools, I was always in a gifted and talented program. I think that they didn't know what to do with me. And at that time, I 100% would say, you know what, I really probably should have had some support for ADD, ADHD. Um, I think that that would have been helpful. It would have been helpful to know, like, oh, Christina, you're not just like toe walking, like actually Michael Jackson trying to moonwalk while you're waiting in line at your teacher's desk, even though you're not supposed to. Your body just doesn't know what to do with itself. I think
Mhm.
that that would have been, I don't know what I would have been able to do with it, but I think it would have been helpful to have embraced that idea a little bit sooner and have an answer to, oh, I'm really good at a very random, weird group of things and hyperfixate on those things still and have these completion issues. There are just things about my personality now as a learner that I look back and I'm like, no, I'm on probably, you know what? If I'm not on one spectrum, I would venture to guess I'm on at least three. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm noticing in the interviews, that the shift to neurodivergence is partially a product of or allowing us to see the interaction of different kinds of cognitive differences. So I interviewed somebody who identifies as ADHD, is what they call it, on the
Okay.
spectrum, but also ADHD. They call them ADHD. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and then and a woman yesterday was telling me that, and she's ADHD. She said that it's a myth that it's lack of focus because it's this hyper
It is
focus.
hyperfocus.
Yeah, and she was telling me how that's like, and she said that it's like being in a fog. She said she can't even hear the alarm when it goes off. She's so sort of immersed. Is that sort of how you think of your hyper focus?
I do. I really do. If I So as an adult, there are many things that I've been trying to eliminate from my life. And as something that I've adopted crocheting just because I was like, okay, I love all this right brain, left brain research. I'm crossing the midline. I'm 51, so I'm thinking about brain health constantly. And I'm like, this will help helps, keep the dementia away because I'm keeping my brain active. And I could crochet and not well, just because it's something for my brain and keeps my hands busy
Mhm.
and look up, think, oh, I'm just going to do one row. And it's like 4 hours later. And I'm like, well, there goes that morning. So there are instances that it very much happens. And I find, like, upon thinking about my childhood and my experience coming through the American education system, at the time, it was, oh, Christina, you're so bright. If you would only apply yourself, if you only would apply yourself. And I'm like, I don't know what that means at 9, 10. I didn't know what that, you mean. Oh, you mean follow the directions the way that they're meant and accomplish the task the way that it's meant to do instead of the way that my brain has broken it down and wants to do it. Now I understand it to mean that, but it takes years. So I think my entrance into wanting to become an educator was I wanted to be there for the kids that were on the outskirts that maybe like you just need someone on your team. You need a cheerleader. It wasn't like some, oh, I have so much to offer, some self aggrandizing thing. It was uh, something that I felt that I could give back having had the experience that I had, like in a very different time with a very, I like to think that we've become more progressive and more responsive to the act of being a young child instead of, you're there to sit still and only speak when spoken to. We're not doing that anymore, thankfully. So I think that that really is what drew me is that I felt that I've been fairly successful with helping these kids that learn very differently and they need someone that's not afraid to say let's scrap all that and I'm going to present this the way that I know or think or hope that you need to learn it or
It
you
sounds
want
like
to learn it.
your own experience of being perhaps ADD or ADHD gives you like a superpower in relating to them. Does it challenge you in the classroom at all? And like, how do you manage your own neurodivergence at the same
Well,
time? Yeah, at the same time as
I'm
you're
very
managing everyone else.
as you can see, these are my readers because I am a person of age and experience. So just little silly things at school. Like I have reading glasses in every corner of my room. I have reading glasses in drawers. I have probably enough reading glasses to outfit every middle-aged woman in my building.
Yes.
They're just like little, I have, I try to make sure I have more than one of a supply. And I'm very fortunate that I'm in a district where the families are able to be supportive. So, things that may come up during the year, I try to think of things. And now digitally, I've tried to create a footprint for myself so that I am able to m- it- maybe leave myself a note if I have made a material or bought a material. I try to leave myself a note for the next year so that when I take it out, I remember what I wanted to change or what I used it for or when I used it, what I followed it up with. So little things like that, like really leaving myself cheat sheets, I think has been very helpful.
So in a way, you manage your environment so that you can manage the kids. So you don't have to
Yes.
worry about missing glasses and such.
Yes.
I'm the same way with readers, by the way. They disappear in the beds and stuff. So I have them all over the house.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm wondering is what do you want the students to know? These my students are, probably between 19 and 26, 27, mostly. We have some returning students. In fact, I know at least one has a PhD and decided to return and get a teaching
Oh,
certificate.
beautiful.
Yeah, and is
That's
taking
great.
this class. So this class is appealing to educators, but also to a lot of students who are thinking about their own neurodivergence. It does seem to be kind of both populations that we have. What do you want them to learn from a class on neurodivergence? What's the takeaway from something like this?
I think the one of the biggest takeaways I would have to say is I think if we focus more on the divergence part of that phrase, neurodivergence, in any sense, so divergence is a gift. I am I look at it as something to be celebrated and a wonderful thing because if it's like I've heard my whole life if we were all we all look the same it would be a very boring world, and that is very true. And I think it's a gift that whatever level of divergence you internally are celebrating, your gift is to probably help someone. And sometimes you don't even know that you're going to be able to help someone, but it'll just snap, something will click for you in that moment, and you're able to snap to and offer someone a suggestion that may be helpful in that moment or to carry forward. So I think really divergence being something that we celebrate instead of looking at it as a detriment. It's something that we need. We need to, it's everywhere, and we need to just really celebrate it everywhere we are.
Hmm. I think that might be the core kind of principle of neurodivergence as an approach is a kind of celebratory sense that maybe there wasn't a neurotypical norm in the way that we thought. A friend of mine was arguing last night. She works with neurodivergent populations and is also neurodivergent herself. She was saying that she feels like it's almost like second wave feminism, where we are right now with this kind of celebrating neurodivergence. Um, Instead of isolated kind of autism over there, ADHD over there. But when I was putting together this course, I was a little overwhelmed by the vast array of neurodivergence. You know, you have Tourette syndrome, dysgraphia, dyslexia. So it was very hard to kind of address and represent everybody and everything. But to me, it's sort of about advocacy and about celebration of these differences. So thank you so much for
Thank
spending
you.
time with us. What I'm trying to do is give them a new kind of way to process information and get perspectives that they can just walk around and listen to instead of lecturing in a cold way on the topic. I started this during COVID. We got bumped online, and I was doing lectures online and boring myself.
Yeah,
And I thought if I'm in my bedroom all the time, boring myself, I've got to figure this out. So I started doing conversations with different people and colleagues, and I just think it's a much more engaging way, more spontaneous and vibrant. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to stop recording for a second, and then we can
yes.
spend a minute. I'll just ask you how you thought it went. Let me find the right button. Okay, stop recording.